It was over 60 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. He wore a cassock, said his prayers every morning, and looked at me like I was his secret prayer. A priest. He chose me, and I was never the same again. If you want to hear how a man of God came to choose a woman over faith and altar, hit subscribe now. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I love connecting with all of you, and trust me, you won't be able to look away. This story will shake your heart in ways you never expected. I've never told this story to anyone, not even to my children, not fully. There are memories that time refuses to erase, and some hearts carry secrets too heavy to share. But today feels different. I'm 81 years old now. My hands are wrinkled, my steps slower, but my heart still remembers every detail of him, of us. It was more than love. It was a storm disguised as silence, a forbidden truth whispered behind stained glass and candlelight. He was a priest, a man who had given his life to God, who stood before the altar every Sunday with holy hands, and a voice that could calm a trembling soul. And yet, he looked at me like I was his salvation. We were never supposed to meet the way we did. We were never supposed to speak the way we did. But we did, and everything changed. If you're expecting a tale of scandal or rebellion, you'll be surprised. This isn't about betrayal. It's about choice, about faith, about what happens when two souls collide in a world that says they never should. So if you're ready, let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment he looked into my eyes and said, "I love you." Back then, I was just a woman trying to live a quiet life. I wasn't looking for love. In fact, I had long accepted that my life would be simple, predictable. I worked at the local bakery every morning before sunrise. The smell of fresh bread and the hush of early dawn were my constants. My days were filled with small routines: sweeping the porch, tending to my mother's garden, going to Mass on Sundays. Faith was important to me, not because someone told me to believe, but because it gave me peace in a world that often felt uncertain. I wasn't rich. I wasn't extraordinary, but I believed in kindness, in honesty, in doing what was right. And that's why, when he looked at me that first time, I should have walked away, but I didn't. You see, I lived alone after my parents passed. There, deaths left me with memories and little else. I found comfort in solitude, in the rhythm of my own footsteps echoing through empty rooms. Church became more than a place of worship. It was company. It was home. And he was the priest who made that home feel like something more. I never imagined our conversations would turn into something deeper. I never thought a man sworn to celibacy could look at me with eyes that carried longing. But he did, and when he said my name, it felt like a prayer I wasn't supposed to answer. It started with a simple act of kindness. I had come to Mass earlier than usual that Sunday morning. The church was still quiet, the candles not yet lit. I remember how the silence felt sacred until his voice broke it. "Good morning," he said softly, standing near the altar. "You're here early." I wasn't sure if I should respond or just nod and walk away, but there was something about the way he said it. Gentle, curious, not like a priest addressing a parishioner, but like a man noticing a woman for the first time. We spoke for only a few minutes, about the weather, about the flowers someone had placed near the Virgin Mary statue. Small talk, harmless. Yet as I walked out of that church, my heart was beating faster than it should have. That moment shouldn't have meant anything. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but it did after. That, our conversations became more frequent. He would ask how my week had been, if I was sleeping well, if I needed help with anything, and each time I told myself it was just kindness, just duty. Until one day, he looked at me and said something that changed everything. "I always look forward to seeing you here." It was a small sentence, a phrase anyone could say, but coming from him, it felt like a crack in the wall between us. a crack I didn't know I wanted to walk through. It was late autumn when our paths truly crossed, the kind of day where the air carries the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. The church steps were damp from the morning mist, and I had come to bring a basket of bread for Father Michael's lunch. It was something small, something kind, something safe, but he wasn't alone. As I approached the rectory door, I heard voices, his and another priest speaking in hushed tones. I hesitated, not wanting to interrupt, but then he saw me. "Wait," he called out, stepping forward. "Let me help you with that." I handed him the basket, and for a moment we just stood there. He didn't move right away, didn't turn back inside. Just looked at me, really looked, like he was memorizing my face. That's when I noticed how different he was up close. Not just his presence, but the way he carried himself. There was a quiet sadness behind his eyes, as if he wore his faith like a second skin, beautiful, but not entirely his own. "I've been meaning to thank you," he said. "You always bring something sweet when no one is watching." I smiled, unsure how to respond. "Someone has to remind you to eat." He chuckled softly, and for the first time, I felt something shift between us. Subtle, barely there, but real. We ended up walking together toward the chapel garden. The golden light of early afternoon filtered through the trees, casting shadows on the stone path. It was peaceful, intimate even, and then, without warning, he stopped. "I don't know why," he said quietly, "but being near you feels different." My breath caught. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he had said. "Being near you feels different." Those words echoed in my mind like a secret I wasn't ready to keep. I told myself it was nothing, that he meant it as a friend, a kind man who appreciated my presence in the same way one appreciates warmth on a cold day. But deep down, I knew better. Something inside me had shifted, not all at once, but like the first crack in ice before winter gives way to spring. I felt it in the way my heart raced when I thought of him, in the way my hands trembled slightly whenever I entered the church. And worst of all, I felt it in the guilt. How could I feel this way about a priest, a man who had given his life to God? It wasn't just wrong, it was impossible. Still, I began to notice things I hadn't before. The way he lingered a second longer than he should when we spoke. How his eyes softened when he saw me walk into Mass. The small smile he gave me, never for anyone else. I started looking forward to Sundays in a way I never had before. I would dress carefully, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I'd arrive early, hoping to catch him alone, even if only for a moment. And each time he greeted me, it felt like a quiet rebellion against everything I had ever been taught. Love wasn't supposed to be this way. Not for someone like me, not for someone like him, but somehow. It was happening anyway, and no matter how hard I tried to stop it, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. I was falling for him, even if I wasn't sure what that meant, even if I knew it could destroy us both. It started with small moments, the kind you don't realize are changing your life until they've already done it. He began to open up to me, not all at once, but in fragments. Late afternoons at the chapel garden became our secret meetings. He would talk about his doubts, about how he had spent years believing silence was the only way to serve God. And then he met me, and silence no longer felt like peace. I used to think faith was enough, he told me one day, his voice barely above a whisper. But sometimes I wonder if I mistook loneliness for devotion. I didn't know what to say. I only knew that hearing him speak like that made my chest ache. We never touched, never crossed any lines. But there were glances, long ones, the kind that said more than words ever could. One Sunday after Mass, he stayed behind while everyone left. I lingered too, pretending to light a candle. "You always stay last," he said, standing near the altar. "I like the quiet," I replied. "So do I," he admitted. "But lately, it feels heavier." I looked at him, really looked. There was something different in his eyes, a weight he hadn't carried before. And then softly, he added, "Sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself and finding you at the same time." My breath caught. That was the first time he said something so close to the truth. From that day on, our conversations deepened. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our fears, the things we never told anyone else. I learned that he had wanted to be a father once, that he had loved someone long ago and let her go because he believed God called him to something greater. But maybe, he confessed one evening, maybe love is the greater thing. I remember the way he said it, like he had been holding those words inside for years, afraid of what they meant. I should have stopped it, should have walked away before either of us fell too far, but I couldn't, because by then I wasn't just falling for him, I was already in love, and somehow he was too, even though he wasn't supposed to be. There came a moment when I realized that silence was no longer an option. We had been dancing around the truth for too long, speaking in half-truths, hiding behind smiles and stolen glances. But love doesn't live in shadows forever. It demands light. And sometimes it demands courage. So one evening, after another quiet walk through the chapel garden, I stopped. I turned to him and said the words I had rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't mean something." He froze. For a second I thought I had gone too far, that I had broken whatever fragile thing we had built between us. But then he looked at me, really looked, and I saw the fear in his eyes, not of me, but of what loving me meant. "I know," he whispered, "and I'm terrified." That honesty broke something open inside me, because now there was no going back, so I took his hand, the first real touch between us, and held it tightly. "We don't have to have all the answers tonight," I said, "but we owe it to each other to stop pretending this isn't real." He didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed my hand like it was the only thing keeping him from falling, and in that moment I knew. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about choice, about stepping into the unknown, and for the first time, I was ready to fall. It happened on a rainy afternoon in early spring. I had woken up with the sound of thunder outside my window. The sky was gray, the streets quiet. I wasn't expecting to see him that day. Sundays were his busiest. But just as I finished making tea, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, he was standing there, soaked by the rain, his cassock clinging to his skin, his eyes searching mine like he needed to be sure I was real. I couldn't stay. "Away," he said, voice low and trembling slightly. I didn't ask questions. I just stepped aside and let him in. That moment, it changed everything. He wasn't wearing his collar. For the first time, he looked less like a priest and more like a man who had made a choice, not for duty, but for love. We sat by, the fireplace wrapped in silence and the soft crackling of the flames. He didn't speak right away. Neither did I. We just watched each other, absorbing the weight of what this meant. Then softly, he reached for my hand. "I've never done this," he admitted. "Being here, with you. Just us." I smiled, heart aching. "Me neither. And we weren't just talking about love. We were talking about stepping into a life we had never imagined possible." Later we walked through the rain-soaked streets. No one knew who he was. No one saw the priest who had chosen me over the altar. They only saw two people walking side by side, lost in their own world. At one point he stopped and turned to me. I used to think loving God meant giving up everything else, he said. But now, I think he brought me to you because he knew I needed someone to remind me I was still human. I don't know if that was true. Maybe faith had nothing to do with it. Maybe it was just fate, or perhaps something deeper than either of us could understand. But in that moment, I believed him, and more importantly, I believed in us, even if it was dangerous, even if it was wrong, because for the first time, we weren't hiding behind church walls or sacred words. We were just together, and that was enough, for now. After that rainy afternoon, everything changed. We weren't just two souls hiding in the corners of a church anymore. We were building something real, fragile, forbidden, but undeniably true. At first we kept our meetings quiet. I would visit him at the rectory under the pretense of bringing food or asking for spiritual advice. He would walk me home under the cover of night, always careful, always aware of what was at stake. But as the weeks passed, we grew bolder. He started coming to my house more often, always late, always cautious. We would talk for hours sometimes about nothing at all, other times about everything, our fears, our dreams, the lives we had imagined before we found each other. One evening he brought me a book. It's one of my favorites, he said, handing it to me. I used to read it when I needed to remember who I was, before I became someone else. I opened it and saw a passage underlined. Love is not a distraction from the divine. Sometimes it is the only way we understand it. I looked up at him, eyes stinging. You really believe that? I asked. He nodded. I want to. And maybe that was all we had. Belief. Not certainty, not permission. Just the quiet knowing that somehow, against all odds, we had found something sacred in each other. Still, love doesn't exist in a vacuum. There were moments of doubt, of guilt. There were nights when he would leave my house, and I could see the weight on his shoulders. The life he had promised to live, clashing with the one he now wanted. I don't know how much longer I can do this, he confessed once, voice trembling. Every time I step into that church, I feel like a liar. I reached for his hand. You're not a liar. You're a man who chose to feel again. He looked at me then, like I was the answer to a prayer he had never dared to say out loud. And even though we both knew the world wouldn't understand us, we held on, because sometimes love isn't about being right. It's about being real. And in every stolen moment, in every whispered word, in every silent tear shed between us, we were more real than we had ever been, even if it meant losing everything else. Looking back now, after all these years, I don't regret it. Not the stolen moments, not the quiet confessions under candlelight, not even the pain that came after. Because love doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the right time or the perfect circumstances. It simply arrives, uninvited, undeniable, and sometimes unbearable. I was never meant to fall for a priest, and he was never meant to fall for me. But we did, and in doing so, we found something neither of us had expected: truce. He taught me that faith doesn't have to live behind church doors, that love isn't always written in scripture, but in the way two people choose each other, even when the world says they shouldn't. And I taught him that he was still human, that he deserved to feel joy, to be seen, to be loved. We didn't get a fairy tale ending. Life rarely gives those. But we got something real, something raw, something worth remembering. People may call it a mistake, a sin, a scandal, but I call it a lesson, because sometimes the heart knows what the soul needs, even when the world refuses to understand. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that love, real love, is never wasted, even if it only lasts a lifetime or a whisper or a memory.